Chair Travis Argue call the audio conference State Plumbing Board's meeting of June 18th, 2020 to order at 9:30 a.m. We will do roll call. Debbie, will you please do that?
Yes, sir. Chair Travis Argue.
Here.
And Vice Chair Matt Roselle is excused this morning. Craig Anderson.
Here.
Corey Fraser.
Here.
Melissa Gatt.
Here.
Molly Keller.
Here.
Joe LeBold.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we do have a quorum, and I would like to announce members of the staff who's connected this morning. Alana Cox is the manager of both Policy and Technical Services and Training and Outreach Services.
Good morning, I'm here.
Andy Skinner, who is our Plumbing Program Chief and Interim Manager of Enforcement.
Present.
Tyler Anderson, our Assistant Attorney General from the Oregon Department of Justice. Tyler, are you here yet this morning?
Yes, I am.
Thank you, Tyler.
Morning.
And Andy
Yes, this is Tyler.
Andy Bolton, our Policy Analyst from Policy and Technical Services.
I'm here. Good morning.
Nick Howard is our Contested Case Representative from Enforcement Services.
Debbie, Nick won't be attending. I will speak for him.
I apologize. Then Sarah Blem-Winfield, our Contested Case Representative from Enforcement Services. Good morning, Sarah. Okay, Mr. Chairman, go ahead.
Okay. Is there any changes to the agenda today? Hearing none, I Chair Argue rule the agenda and order of business approved. All right, the next thing is the approval of the draft meeting minutes for April 2016. Have there been any changes to the draft meeting minutes? Hearing none, I Chair Argue rule the draft meeting minutes of April 16, 2020 are final. The next date of our scheduled meeting will be August 20th, 2020. Are there any public comments? Andy, I don't believe there could be, but.
Correct, Mr. Chair. There are no public comments for the.
Okay, so next up would be the program update, and that would be with Mr. Andy Skinner.
Thank you, Chair Argue and members of the board. For the record, my name is Andy Skinner. I'm the Plumbing Program Chief for the State of Oregon Building Codes Division. I hope everybody is still staying safe and healthy in these challenging times that we're having. I do have just a couple of follow-up items that we spoke on at the last meeting. I mentioned at the last meeting that we were not able to roll the code out October 1st of 2020. We did not have a deadline date or a nailed down date yet, but we do now. It will be April 1st of 2021. That's when the 2020 OPS seed will roll out and be adopted. I also mentioned last meeting about a couple of interim amendments or changes that we would like to move forward. I told the board I was going to bring a list. We are still collecting feedback from the industry on that. I do have 5 line items already, and just waiting for a few more contacts, and then I'll bring that document back to the board at the next board meeting for their consideration and fiscal impact. The items I do have currently are the water conserving fixture table will be moved forward. The board voted on that a couple of meetings ago. Number 2 would be to delete the wet room language in Chapter 4 to allow a curbless shower to meet the minimum dimensions that are already in code. Number 3 will be the retro from a tub to a shower to allow an 1.5-inch trap and trap arm and drain. Number 4 will be the footnote in table 703.2 that is going to allow 5 water closets on a 3-inch horizontal line. That will also require adjustment in section 708.1 for the minimum grade allowed on a 3-inch. That'll move to a 1/4 inch. An 1/8 inch will not be allowed anymore. And also it'll delete the footnote that's currently in 703.2 under the 3-inch horizontal sewer or pipe size. Number 5 will be the footnote 8 that is going to allow 8 laboratories on a commercial 1.5-inch horizontal line, and that will be in table 703.2. That is currently what we have on the list. As I mentioned, we're still collecting some feedback and should have you that document at the next board meeting. Are there any questions?
Nope.
Okay,
Thank
no
you.
question. Thank you.
All right. Next up is the approval of the corrected proposed order for Cris Brackens. Tyler and Nick, would you guys please address the items?
Sure, and this is Tyler Anderson from DOJ. I'll be pinch hitting for Nick Howard today. He was unavailable due to a prior commitment. So just, let's see, introducing this, just for clarity of the record, the reason it's a corrected proposed order is there were a couple minor Scrivener's errors in the issued proposed order as far as the representative who was present at the hearing, and I believe there was a problem with one of the addresses. So it didn't deal with anything of the substance of the order. Getting to the substance of the order in the case itself, this case involved respondent Cris Brackens, and the questions presented were whether he had engaged in the business of a plumbing contractor without proper license, whether the board should revoke Mr. Bracken's journeyman plumber's license, whether Mr. Bracken should be assessed civil penalties for his conduct, and whether the board should disqualify Mr. Bracken from obtaining a plumbing license for any plumbing license for a period of 5 years. The underlying facts of this case, and part of the reason the disciplinary sanctions are they're significant, but aren't both consistent with the penalty matrix and justified by the facts, are Mr. Brackens had never held, he'd held a journeyman plumber's license, but he had never at any point held a valid plumbing contractor license. This is significant because while employed by Kennedy Plumbing, Mr. Brackens, when working with a elderly consumer, convinced that consumer to pay him directly for plumbing work, not going through Kennedy. So Mr. Brackens essentially had this consumer writing him personal checks using his position as an employee with Kennedy, gained access to debit card information, and so the severity of both the violations themselves and the underlying facts that he took advantage of his position as a licensee to misrepresent the work he could do to a vulnerable consumer are significant. The ALJ found in our favor after a day of hearing. Mr. Brackens actually, while not related to the administrative matter, Mr. Brackens participated telephonically because at the time he was incarcerated for underlying criminal violations related to this fact pattern. So the recommendation would be that the board adopt the corrected proposed order and issue a final order. And just for clarity for you all, the proposed order would call for the revocation of Mr. Bracken's journeyman plumber license, a civil penalty of $6,000 for engaging in the business of a plumbing contractor without proper licensure, and a disqualification for Mr. Brackens from obtaining any plumbing license for a 5-year period. Any questions?
I have none. Is there anybody else on the board that does?
No.
No.
Craig, no.
Okay. All right, Who has on their electronic device the motion that he just read out that they could read as a motion? And I'm asking for a volunteer. I think you know I'm hinting towards you, Melissa.
I know, I'm looking for it here.
Mr. Chair, would it be helpful if the Assistant Attorney General repeated the proposed motion to the best of his ability at this time?
Yes, and then we could just say we approve, or does it need to be in one of the board members' voice, or?
Yes, it would be helpful if one of the board members voiced the motion, but what the agency council is recommending is the board make a motion for the adoption of the corrected proposed order issued by the Office of Administrative Hearings as a final order.
Okay. All right, Melissa, you heard what he said.
Yeah, what was the office of what?
Office of Administrative Hearings, Melissa.
Okay. So I would like to make a motion that we adopt the proposed order from the Office of Administrative Hearings, right?
Yep, in the matter of Cris Brackens.
In the matter of Cris Brackens. So I'd like to propose the adoption of the proposed order from the Office of Administrative Hearings in the case of Cris Brackens.
Okay, there's been a motion made. Is there any discussion?
Craig Anderson, no.
Okay, hearing none,
Mr. Chair, I'd like to call roll, please.
Yeah, that's what I was asking you to do.
Thank you. Joe LeBold,
Aye.
Molly Keller,
Aye.
Melissa Gatt,
Aye.
Cory Fraser,
Aye.
Craig Anderson,
Aye.
and Chair Travis Argue.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you. So, up next will be the summary of enforcement cases, and that's with Sarah.
Mr. Chair, good morning, Chair Archie, members of the board. For the record, Sarah Van Lindel, the case representative for the division. Before the board is a summary of enforcement recently taken by the division. These are all first-time violators, pretty standard. The violations all occurred at single addresses. No board action is required on this item, but I am available to answer any questions you might have.
I don't have questions. I'm glad to see that we still have enforcement doing their job, so that's nice.
We guys a little bit because of COVID, but we're still out there pursuing things.
Right, good. That's a good thing. All right, next, there are no communications, no appeals, no unfinished business. The next up is new business. Andy, will you address the new business items?
Thank you, Chair Argue, members of the board. For the record, my name is Andy Skinner. I'm the Plumbing Program Chief for the State of Oregon Building Codes. What you have before you today is Agenda Item 7A. This is a change in scoping of the water heater installer license. If the board remembers, a couple meetings ago, part of this industry came to the board and asked for additional language to change the scope to allow for current products and current methodologies. The rule was probably a little archaic, a little outdated, and methodologies have changed and products have changed. What you have before you is those changes. I would just like to point to the highlighted changes. It's really to clarify the conversion between electric and fuel type and the conversion between storage type and instantaneous or instantaneous back to storage type. And then the other addition was to change the 24 inches that was the maximum allowed connection distance to 96 inches. And the reason for the 96 inches, which is about 8 feet, is some of the storage type newer water heaters are about 6 feet high. And then, you know, based on the rough end above that for the stub outs for the both hot and cold water, there could be a potential of about 8 feet of piping. So we felt 8 feet was probably a good number to land on. Nothing else has changed in the rule, but what I would like to point today, the board, to is the additional document that was sent in by Mackenzie James. The way we're doing the board meeting, we aren't able to get public comments, so I told them I'd just point the board to it. Does everybody have that document in front of them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to highlight that what's not included in the current rule language is a request in the document from that industry to also add the shutoff valve as part of the scoping for the WHI. That has always been kind of that demarcation. They could not change out the water heater or go upstream of the water heater valve. But that is a request from the industry to include that into the new rule language. So that is a decision that the board can make today, whether they want to include that in the language or not. Any questions?
Well, I have a comment. This is Travis Argue, Chair. I'm not comfortable with the moving of the shutoff valve itself. I'm comfortable with moving downstream, and that's just my choice. So if there's anybody else who would like to chime in on that, go ahead.
Craig Anderson, through the chair. I'm in agreement there. In relocating, replacing, you're going to be shutting down the complete house system. And with that becomes a number of steps in repurging, possibly damaging a secondary valve, be it the main house valve or something out at the meter. I believe that the art of plumbing is such that a professional licensed plumber should address that.
Okay, thank you.
But also, if I may, Chair, just one clarifying point is also in this rule, it does not allow the water heater to be displaced from its original location, so there would be no alteration of location. I just want to make sure that's clear to the board.
Yeah, we don't want to have anybody, in my opinion, I don't think we want to have anybody moving a water heater to the other side of a room or relocating it into a different area. That's the work of a plumber. It's not the work of a water heater installer.
But we're talking specifically about the possible relocation of a valve. We're talking about the possible repairing of a valve. That is really what we're discussing right now, correct?
The replacement of the valve, yes, or reconditioning of the valve, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Not the relocation.
Right. Okay. I still feel that is in the purview of a licensed plumber because of the dynamics involved in replacing or repairing a valve.
I have a question. This is Melissa Gitt, through the chair. I'm curious, Andy, why we're changing, maybe I'm just not understanding this right, but if they can change out the water heater from its location, only from its location where it sits, and they can't move the water heater over at all, you know, that has to stay in that same spot, then why would we change the maximum length of piping extending from the hot and cold water connections from 24 inches to 96 inches?
Okay. Great question. And again, some of the new products that are out there have different connection locations. For instance, a heat pump style water heater, some of those have a cold water connection at the bottom. That would require additional piping. To go from a storage type water heater to an instantaneous type water heater is going to take a little bit different piping methodology there, because you've got to come down and come up in the bottom of the instantaneous. So that was the reason for expansion of the 24 inches to 96 inches.
Okay. And you're saying that McKenzie's proposing that we allow for the change of the shutoff valve, is that correct? He wanted to make that change?
That is correct. He wanted to add it to the current rule that is before the board today, which it is not currently in there. The language still reads the same as it has always read, that the shutoff valve is that demarcation. The WHI cannot change that.
Okay. And did he say, and just the reason is maybe because that shutoff valve has failed, or what's the reasoning for wanting to replace that shutoff valve?
Well, I think he's explained it in that document that's presented to the board today. I can't really speak specifically to the reasoning behind that. I can just point the board to the document.
Okay. Yeah, I see the document. I was just curious if you had any further information with him. Okay.
All right, is there any other further discussion or questions before we make a motion? Okay, hearing none, I'll go ahead and make the motion. I'll make a motion to approve the proposed rule amendments and forward to the administrator for rulemaking and subsequent adoption with no changes to the proposal. So, motion's been made. Is there any discussion?
No.
Hearing none. Debbie, would you call a roll, please?
Yes, sir. Joe LeBold?
Aye.
Molly Keller?
Aye.
Melissa Gett?
Aye.
Corey Fraser?
Aye.
Craig Anderson?
Aye.
And Chair Argue.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. Next up is Andy Bolton, the policy analyst. Review of the approved committee recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We had 7 applications from one organization for 3 courses and 4 instructors. The committee reviewed the applications and has recommended them all for approval.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Are there any questions for Andy? Hearing none, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the committee recommendations. Motion's been made. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and go for a vote. Debbie, will you call roll again, please?
Yes, sir. Joe LeBold?
Aye.
Molly Keller?
Aye.
Melissa Gett?
Aye.
Corey Fraser?
Aye.
Craig Anderson?
Aye.
And Chair Travis Argue.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you, Debbie. So next, there are no announcements. And the next thing on the deal is the adjournment. I, Chair Travis Argue, adjourn this meeting. Thank you.